Okay, guys. Can we all hear me, or do I need to speak louder? Can you hear me at the back? Always wanted to say that. So welcome to the Social Code Leeds. So this is our first ever time bringing the Social Code over the Pennines. We've run it before. It was originated in Manchester. There's a guy in a purple top that you'll see running around tonight. He founded the Social Code. He's called Ross. So if you have any social code related questions, he's your man, not me. I don't have a clue. I just work with him. But founded in 2020, born in Manchester, and now we have spread to the Southwest, have their first one in a few weeks' time, down in Bristol. This is our first one in Leeds. We've run a few in Manchester, and we've also gone over to the US in Austin and Philadelphia as well. So we are spreading, we are growing. It's now grown to 2,250 members, all of like-minded, passionate techies such as yourselves. And we are now actually, in the coming weeks, hosting the official Fringe event for Manchester Tech Festival, which is being done for the first time as well. So we really have grown as a festival, and it's the second largest event at the festival as well. So exciting times for the Social Code, and fantastic to bring it over to Leeds. So a bit about what this community is and what we try to do. So we try to create a platform and a community for people such as yourselves, passionate about technology, people who know a lot, or people who are quite new and want to come into it, to share their knowledge. And we encourage feedback as well. So there's no bad questions. There's no wrong answers. We're all here to learn and find out different ways of doing things and just share the knowledge that we have. And we really want to create a platform where we can all be a community together. And it's great after all the years that we've had where everything's been over Zoom, that we can all sit in a room together and actually see people in person and listen to them. So this is a little bit about the ethos of the Social Code. Now, a little bit about me as well. It's not about me, this, but I thought I'd introduce myself. So I am a senior consultant at Oscar Technology, based in Manchester. And I work in the areas of Yorkshire. So this is why I've come in and decided to host this one. I also have a little a side project and charity community that I run as well, which there's some beer mats. So if you see this, this is what it is. It's a men's mental health community called 2 Pints Deep, and an anonymous messaging platform. So just wanted to introduce that to you guys. I have done it at previous tech events before, because the tech world has been very remote for a long time, and it's something that I think needs addressing in the wider community. So if you want to know a little bit more about that, come and find me after, and happy to talk about it and chew your ear off about that. But we have three fantastic speakers tonight. So the first one is going to be Tim Lewis from Evri, and he's going to talk to us about Evri's rebrand. We will then have a little a break to get pizza and some beers and refill, and we'll come back, and then we have David Johnson from Flipdish, who's going to talk about imposter syndrome, which is something that at all levels of work can be relatable. And then we have David Gregory from Opencast, who is going to talk to us about giving back to open source software, why and how, that type of thing. So without further ado, I'll pass over to the people that are more interesting. So Tim Lewis, as well as Kieran Evans as well, is going to come and join him, who's one of the lead developers on it. So cheers, guys.
Yeah. So thank you all for coming. When Luke and Ellie and Will and the rest of the people at Social Code sort of approached us about doing an event in Leeds, we kind of really jumped to the chance, because we're doing the first Social Code in Leeds. That's brilliant, right? Which is excellent. It also gives us a chance to say, this is who we are. We are Evri. We are parcel delivery people. That's what we do, but it gives us a chance to say, look at what we're doing. We want to sort of get into the community and say, this is the sort of stuff that we do. And also, like, you know, we're really super proud of these offices. So, like, come and look at our office, because it's great. So, yeah. We haven't been Evri for very long. We used to be Hermes. And we were tasked with turning Hermes into Evri. And just want to share a little bit of the journey that we took in making that happen from a tech point of view, especially a front-end tech point of view. So I'm now going to undoubtedly press the wrong button. There we go, brilliant. So Kieran Green is one of our senior front-end developers and is far more qualified and competent than I am. I just like talking to people because I like meeting people. That's why I'm here. So yeah, Mercury to Evri. Mercury was our not incredibly well thought out or complicated code name for doing this project. From Hermes to Evri. If people like mixing up their Greek and Roman mythology, there we go. So who are we? I just want to do a very quick sort of intro to us, just because, you know, it's a talk. We like to sort of tell the story about who we are. So who are we? We are one of the biggest, if not the biggest, parcel delivery firm in the UK. So, you know, our business is, it's about send. You know, it's about me sending birthday presents to my mum. It's about people like we partner with, like Next, sending clothes to your doorstep because you've ordered online, and a lot of other things in between. We've got send, we've got corporate accounts, we do international, we've got business accounts, and all of these are different levels of business that we do. Yeah, there's an awful lot of stuff that goes on here. We are the biggest. Look, there we go. We've got 5 hubs, which are big buildings full of very expensive equipment, 27 depots, a return centre, thousands of parcel shops, even more couriers, lots of lockers, trailers, vans, tractor units, all over the place. We generate an awful lot of data. We do a lot of things, and we move a lot of things from A to B. That's what we do. We are forecast to send over 680 million parcels through our network this year. Now, if you think about that, that's quite a lot of presents to your mum. So, Project Mercury, what is it? This was an exciting delivery arriving on the 10th of the 3rd, 22. I'll come back to that date in a minute, but we sort of found out we were going to do a rebrand project. And for that, we needed to change what the website did, what the app did, how we presented ourselves to you, the public. This is a bit of that story. So the ask had a brand new design that we had to come up with based off what the marketing agencies came up for us in print media and what you stick on the side of a van. We had to turn that into a system that works digitally. Had a new website, new mobile app, and we had 4 months to do it in, which was quite the ask. And I think that face was quite often reproduced by many of our staff when we found out about this. That was the original, like, you want what by when. We had a hard deadline, right? And we sort of committed to it. So we thought, how on earth do we deliver this? That is a big ask for quite a big website, separate mobile app, digitize the design, something that works digitally, and we have 4 months essentially to do it in. So yeah, the first thing was like, well, we're quite a big business and we've got a process, because big businesses acquire process. So one of the things we thought immediately was that this is going to be really difficult to do if we stick to our normal business as usual process. So we took the decision that we were going to take some of our experts who were good at doing this sort of stuff, get them together, isolate them from everything else and go, this is what we need to do, let's get it done. Yeah, so we operated outside our normal delivery model to do this in digital, in technical, in engineering. We got UX, the people who were coming up with a digital design, we got our engineers, and we got business analysts together, and they just sat as a sort of strike team, if you want, and just got on with it. And we sort of let them get on with it because we went, we need you to do this, we trust you, go do it. Teamwork was really good. We made much progress. So that kind of sets the scene, right? But what we're here for is a tech talk, right? So let's get into some of the technical decisions that we took and the reasons why we took them and how it's helped us to actually now deliver the Evri website rather than the Hermes one. So some of the tech decisions, terrible diagram, but it was, you know, some of this sort of thinking went into it. Won't dig too deep, but at this point I shall hand you on to Kieran, who will talk to you about, I believe,
tech decisions.
Some of the tech decisions.
Yeah, so talking a bit about these tech decisions that we made. So to start off, the first thing which we had to kind of figure out when we were approaching this piece of work is how we take designs from the designers, which were obviously influenced by the marketing agency, and how we actually work with those designs. So prior to this project, we were using Zeppelin and we were using Overflow and various other tools to kind of work with designs. And that's how the UX designers were taking their designs and passing them over to us to work on. One of the kind of themes with this project, Project Mercury, is we have a hard deadline for the 4 months, but we don't want to make bad tech choices that are going to then bite us down the line, because even though it's like a tight deadline, you've got to live with the outcome of it for many years to come, right? So one of the decisions we made was to move to Figma. So this is kind of the UX designer's choice. One of the benefits of moving to Figma was that these are live files which we could access. So as designers were making live updates to files, we could just see a live change happen there and then through the web browser. This is very important because on a normal project, like we're saying, we kind of detach ourselves from the usual model. Usually we get UX designs, they're signed off, and then we start doing the actual dev. Unfortunately, because of the time pressure, that couldn't happen here. So we were kind of drip fed designs as time went on to develop against. So it was really good to like have live files that massively cut down that feedback loop so that we could have like conversations every single day with designers to make sure we're all on the same page. You can see on the right here, this is an example of the kind of files we're working with in Figma. This is showing the input component and how the input component should look and behave in different scenarios. So you can see that there's like 2 separate examples there. The actual file for this is not 2 columns wide, it's actually, I think, 11 columns wide. And this is one component, and there's over 30 components in design files. So this is a huge, super comprehensive design system, which is all annotated. It's an incredible project from the UX designers. And then the things which are also mentioned here, it's kind of industry-wide now. Almost every single website gets more mobile visitors than web visitors nowadays. So we're over the 50% mark. So when we kind of transitioned from Hermes to Evri, we needed to make sure that we, not only from a dev point of view, but design, had a mobile first approach so that the website looks great on mobile phones. I mean, it should look great everywhere, but specifically on mobile phones. Then the last thing is that when you're doing a big rebrand like this, it's very important that your new design is consistent because it's an entirely new design and a new system. So if we nailed the components and the designers designed components which had like a very high level of design consistency, then it worked fantastically to kind of enforce the brand without us actually having to think too much about every single page. Because if each component looks correct together, then when you make pages out of them, they look correct. So that was kind of the big decision that the designers made. One of the big decisions that we made was to swap from a traditional CMS to a headless CMS. If anyone here has worked with a traditional CMS, you probably know why we wanted to move to a headless CMS. Traditional CMSs are horrible. The old CMS we were using had no Vue integration. So Vue is the JavaScript framework that we use for all of our components. And it had no integration with Vue. So in the old Hermes world, we had a set of components which were written in Vue, which we use on our single page applications. And then we had another set of components which were inside of our CMS, but it's very much like it was like a black hole where the amount of understanding was much weaker in that area. So by moving to a headless CMS, we could actually cut it down so that we can have one component library and everything gets built off of the same components. So regardless of whether they're in single page applications or in the CMS, so like whether front end devs are using them or some of our marketing staff which run our CMS, everyone can use the same components and build from the same components. And then the same things as I was talking about before, this is great because it means that we don't have to worry about our designs kind of becoming weak by us having 2 sets of components that look slightly different and having a lack of consistency across the website. Because everything's coming from one place, it's obviously going to be consistent, and it's obviously a lot less work to actually have to manage one set of components than 2. Kind of the what do you say, the buzzword slide? Yeah.
This is the hot stuff, right? Everyone talks about
micro front ends. It's the kind of new thing that everyone loves. So we have implemented a micro front end architecture in the new website. So to kind of give a brief overview of what a micro front end architecture is, you can see on the right hand side here in this diagram that I put together in PowerPoint, which looks great, doesn't it? We have individual spars, like single page applications for our different flows on the website. So send, returns, track, they all have their own single page application. Previously, they were all connected to the CMS, but the CMS had no interaction with them. They just happened to be there. Now we've moved to a system with the headless CMS where we have a single application, which we've creatively named AppSpar, which contains all of the other individual spars inside of it. So this was important for us to do because this means that you kind of decouple squads, which when we're saying decoupling squads, we mean by having these individual spars inside of AppSpar, they can be individually versioned, which means a squad can work on the send spar and a squad can work on the track spar, and they can work completely in isolation, do whatever work they want, and then they can increment the version of their spar and then increment that version inside of the AppSpar here, which means throughout the process, like we're talking about, 4 months is a crazy short time to do the amount of work that we did. So being able to have lots of separate squads all able to work on their own areas without having much interference with each other and not having to deal with like merge hell basically was super, super beneficial, not only during the project, but now going forwards as well. So now the kind of big part of the rebrand, building the actual components themselves. So this is just a screenshot of our actual homepage on the website right now. And sometimes when I speak to people about components, there's a bit of a misunderstanding of what a component is. So a component can be something as small as an icon, and it could be something as big as a large complex component like this on the right-hand side here, showing the send a parcel. On the next slide, I've just taken this one screenshot and just circled all of the components that come from our component library are on this page. So as you can kind of see here, everything is components. And this is the entire plan, right? Because this is why we chose to put so much time into the component library. Because if you get your component library correct and everything works well together and everything looks correct together, then it means that when you drop it onto the page, it's like using Lego bricks at this point, right? Where everything's already there and you're just piecing together the Lego bricks to make everything look correct. So again, same thing as we were saying, it's all about design consistency and making the user feel like everything on the site fits together. So when you develop the components, you're not always developing them to be used somewhere instantly. So we're using Storybook. Storybook's a pretty common like little application, I guess you call it, to run, and it shows you all of your individual components inside of it. So you can see on this left-hand side bar, these are all of the components which we have already built, which you can actually use when we're doing work on the website. So this was super valuable to us because it's super useful to be able to develop your components in isolation, but this is also a great tool for not just developers, for designers and product owners and testers and all these different people across the business. This is a live link which we have internally, and anybody can go on and see which components we have already. So when someone approaches a new piece of work, instead of starting everything from scratch and maybe getting a little bit different here and there to what we have in the component library, everyone can build everything from this component library. And it means that we have design consistency, but we also massively reduce the amount of work that which we have to do individually, because it's a ton of work to create all these components. So if you're creating them over and over and over again every time you use them, then not only are you going to have design inconsistencies eventually, you're going to have lots of things to maintain, and you're wasting time where you could just pull a component from here, put it straight onto a web page, and it looks and should behave correctly. And then obviously there's other benefits, such as one of the big ones for us is you can see on the bottom here, this bottom section, Storybook has built-in accessibility testing, which is fantastic for us because accessibility is something which we should all be caring more about. And if you create each page from scratch over and over again, it's very difficult to maintain the accessibility levels on a page. But if you've got the accessibility built correctly into your components, then it's much easier to maintain a high level of accessibility across your website. So this is like my kind of boring slide. This is my, I'm not going to bore any of you with like tons of detail about any of this, but if any of you are interested in any of the kind of words you see on here, basically, feel free to grab me after this. This is the kind of more boring techie stuff that we've done. So all of our spas are written using view 2. We kind of have a bigger picture view to move everything to view 3 with TypeScript. But with that one specifically, you kind of have to choose your battles when you're delivering a piece of work on this scale in the time scale that we had. We didn't have time to do all the upgrades to view 3 then, so we kind of delayed that. We're not using a CSS framework. Everything's custom. All of our pipelines will move to Jenkins, which might be a controversial one. I don't know. It depends what people think. We use Learner as a tool to manage the monorepo of components, and we use a single SPA framework for the micro front-end architecture like I was talking about before. So yeah, that's my kind of boring slide. If anyone wants to talk to me after this presentation about these, yeah, just feel free to grab me. But I think that should be everything from me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cheers, Kieran. Thank you. So I thought it would be better to have an expert talk about this stuff rather than me kind of bluffing. You know, this is why we have people like Kieran here. They're genuinely brilliant at what they do. So just want to talk a little bit about the build, right? So we've sort of discussed the tech and how we went towards it. And, you know, some of the story about how we made this happen is, you know, we've rushed through some tech decisions, but it's really important to remember what Kieran just said. Is like, we had a very limited time, but we were really, really cognizant about, we have to live with this. Yeah, so we needed to make sure that what we were building is something we'd be proud about, which I think we are, and something we can still be using in a year, 2 years time, because it'd be terrible if we just literally rushed at it and it was terrible and we had to then redo it. I think I'd have been shouted at would be the probably most favorable outcome for me at that point. So bit about the build, just a little bit like, okay, we've already done this. We've touched on mobile first. Now, and this was super important. So we went mobile first because most people access the web on mobile devices now. The old website was not designed mobile first. And whilst this is kind of, yeah, I can kind of use that on my mobile, I personally think, and I hope everyone agrees, that this looks far better. It's cleaner, it's more consistent. It's been designed with, you know, the labels above the text boxes easy to read on the mobile device. It's no, it doesn't disappear when you know. Our UX department have thought about all this and they've gone, you know what, our users are use mobile, so let's actually design it for them. And then we can worry about what it looks like on the web, on the desktop. And actually, it's a lot easier to scale up and out than it is to take something that's been designed big and squeeze it down. And that was the difference, I think, between the two. So this again, yeah, it's kind of usable, but it's a bit old school design now for us, whereas this is far cleaner. You know, we took decisions like we want to get rid of the cartoon parcel people and we want to use real face. So, you know, visit the website, it's online. I really hope, else I think people will be shouting at me now. You know, have a look around, see what, you know, actually what the design looks like. It's really clean. It's all managed out of a really decent headless CMS. We're really super happy with how this came out. That isn't to say it was all plain sailing. So just to sort of come back round to the, you want to do what in how long? The launch. So if you remember back to the opening slide, well, one of the opening slides where it said the 10th of March 22, that was actually the date of one of our big internal conferences that we have at Evri. Or actually was Hermes at the time, where our CEO and I think Vernon Kay was there as well, actually, doing a presentation. People with, like, there was plenty of wine and champagne and beer. People want to join themselves. And I was supposed to be there. I wasn't, because I was listening into the live cast of this whilst we were still sort of furiously sort of organizing this. And I think it was the CEO who said, and we are launching our website on the 14th at midnight. And I'm sitting there listening going, we're not, because we were still pulling together and it was still looking really shonky, if that's a technical term. So yeah, deadline day. Work continued to the wire. So I make no apologies for using Jim there from transfer deadline day. Work continued to the wire. I think, when did the last commit go in?
About 5 minutes before.
About 5 minutes to midnight on launch day at midnight. Yeah, it was that close because we had a lot to do. You know, we aren't kind of trying to hide away from that. So there was things like we had to make sure all the old domain. So, you know, we're no longer at Hermes, we're at Evri. So we had to make sure all the redirects were in place and were going to happen at the right time when we press go. So there's things like caches have to be cleared, configs have to be changed. And we did that, and there was, I mean, we were pretty confident it would work, but there was quite a lot of nerves, and I think fingernails were bitten down to the quick. And it got to midnight, and we pressed the button and sort of winced and checked the website, and it was there, brand new website. And the collective sigh of relief and sort of cheer of thank you. Never work with children, animals, and tech, I guess. And it was there, and it was that sense of like that 4 months of absolute just all the hours under the sun. I mean, this guy, some of the guys in the audience here who worked ridiculous amounts of hours, put in so much effort to make this happen. We turned it on and it was there, and that was like it was like, you know, your football team signing Lionel Messi. You know, it was like, oh yes, brilliant. I don't want to underestimate it. It was a really tough thing, and we made some decisions on the fly that we would like, we need to live with this going forward. That was always in our mind, but we had to weigh up some risks as well and make some decisions based on that. So it kind of brings us to sort towards the end of this, like, what do we learn by doing things this way? I mean, I haven't put it on the point, but like, I'd rather we had more than 4 months, put it that way. But basically, top one is the key one for me. You've got to be pragmatic. You've got to have a goal in mind. You need to know where you want to be. And you need to remember that when you get there, you have to live with what you do. But you have to be pragmatic. It can't be perfect if you don't have the time to do it. And we did take some decisions that we possibly gave us some challenges down the line that we had to deal with, but at the time they were the right decisions to take. And we went into that with eyes open. We didn't do it blindly. We know that we're taking a few risks doing this, but we need to hit that deadline. Good enough is good enough. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. When we hit that button and we launched, of all the single page apps that we saw on that figure a few pages back, some of them were, I won't lie now, some of them was a little bit smoke and mirrors. We hadn't actually managed to do all the Spark conversions by this point. We'd done all of the ones we knew we could do, and then just papered over a few little cracks, which we knew we would then get to. And you know what? That's okay. As tech people who deliver solutions for businesses, that's okay. The important thing is what we present out to the public and what everyone else sees is what actually matters, as long as it works. And bottom line, if I can still send a parcel to my mum, brilliant. And I put this third one in as tooling. Tooling is important. We haven't touched on this too much because of not a huge amount of time, but building your tooling around what you're doing is just so important. It picks up a lot of manual things that you'd have to do, makes them automatic, makes them predictable, makes them correct. We've got so much tooling that's running around underneath this that helps the whole thing work. Not just CI/CD pipelines, but there's lots of little things that, I mean, you can come talk to anyone who's wearing one of these lanyards, or if Reese throws his hands up at the back there, say hello, Reese. Stop looking away. Reese has been, again, one of the people who's been diving into some of the tooling around this, so I feel free to like extract all the knowledge out of his head. Yeah, that was it, right? So pragmatism. good enough is good enough. Doesn't have to be perfect all the time, as long as it's good enough. Just make that decision knowing that's what you live with, and get your tooling right. It'll help you out. And that's it from us. So thank you very much. I guess any questions, feel free to fire them out.
What we will do here, because we are live on the
we like-
internet, please do not swear.
Yeah.
We will, if any questions come from the audience, if you could repeat the question before you answer it,
Yeah.
that'd be great. So, any questions, anyone?
Yes.
Why are you branding? Hermes is such a great name.
So the question is why the rebranding Hermes is such a great name. That's a really good question. So Hermes is originally, well, we went through a storied history. Bottom line, there is Hermes, who are still a company in Europe, Germany specifically. They did own the UK division. They sold the UK division off to a company called Advent, and then sort of said, yeah, you can stay as Hermes for a while, but we need you to change your name just in case we later on want to expand back into the UK as Hermes. So essentially that's why.
Any more goes
Yeah.
in here?
What headless CMS did you go with?
Oh, yeah, we didn't mention it, do we? So the question is, what headless CMS did we go with? We have gone with Prismic. Yeah, which is really good. So
Yeah, I had one. When you were translating from Figma to your kind of code library, did you experiment with any of the is it Vue you're using?
Yeah, it's Vue.
Did you try and do that to give you a little bit of a leg up? Because I know for React, they're pretty terrible.
So yeah, just paraphrase the question a bit. Did we look at any of the tooling to move designs from Figma into Vue? I'll hand over to Kieran here.
Yeah, well, we've kind of, as individuals, looked into it, but as you've mentioned with the React version, it's pretty awful. And like we're saying, we have a long time to live with the output of this project. So yeah, I mean, if you ever look at what these tools spit out from Figma, they're never really high quality, and it's kind of just does not meet the standards that we want to set and kind of follow. So not particularly, but when it spits out some of the CSS stuff for you, it's okay. But apart from that, no, not really.
We'll go one more from the room, and then we do have one on the World Wide Web as well.
Okay.
So go at the back there.
What made you choose Vue over any of the frameworks that are behind it?
So why did we use Vue over any other framework, Kieran?
I guess it's kind of a difficult question to answer for this project because we are a company that we're using Vue before. So I can like tell you the personal reasons that I like Vue, but it's kind of different, right? So for this project specifically, the members of staff that we had to work on this project are all Vue enthusiasts and Vue experts. So it wouldn't have made sense to not use Vue.
That's essentially it. We have Vue developers. We're a Vue house, and there is more stuff. Sort of, we have portals that are internal to the site that are also in Vue. So it's that knowledge within the business. So.
And then one quick one from the live stream. In hindsight, from Andy Martin, in hindsight, was there anything you would have done differently?
We've
only got about 2 minutes.
Okay. I definitely would have shouted even louder for more time. But the one thing I think that we made a decision on that we came to regret was when we set the redirects up, we somewhat naively thought, yeah, well, we're never going back to Hermes. Let's set up permanent redirects. That was a mistake. Because once they're permanent, they're cached on everyone's local machines, never to be cleared until someone actually takes action themselves, which we have no way of actually intercepting that request. That did cause a few headaches for the month after launch. It's quietened down now, but yeah, if we had to do anything different, it would have been, you know what, we should probably do 307 redirects or on 301s. HTTP codes, I don't want to.
Well, thank you very much, guys. And if you do have any more questions, please do grab the guys after. But thanks again.
Cheers.
Yeah. So, guys, even better. If you didn't think it would get better, it does. The pizza has arrived. So thanks again to the guys for Evri for hosting us here today, and also for this pizza and the beers. They are now over there. Please do indulge, go and enjoy them. And we'll be back here in about 7 to 10 minutes for the next talk. Hey guys. Are we volume? Yeah. Okay, guys. So if we can slowly make our way back, there is some more chairs at the front. Please do make your way down here. You do belong here. It's okay to be here. It's fine. And we're going to tell you why. Well, David's going to tell you why it's okay to come and sit at the front on these chairs, because you earned sitting on these chairs. So please do come round. David is software engineering manager at Flipdish. He's going to talk to you a little bit more about imposter syndrome. So over to David. He did ask for some rock music to come on to, but we can't quite get that because it's a bit late notice. So
no copyright.
If anyone wants to sing, no, I'm joking. Over to you, David.
Is it just the level?
Just the
Hi, everybody. So I'm David Johnson. I'll be talking about imposter syndrome. Now, fair warning, my slides are not going to be as flash as the guys from Evri. They've done a proper job at this. So I'm David, like I said, I'm David Johnson, senior engineer, software engineer manager at Flipdish. Anybody who is interested, that's my LinkedIn. I pretty much accept everybody, so, you know, go for it. And a little bit of a story about creating this presentation. It's the first one back for me since before COVID happened. I've done a few remotely, but not actually in person. And to be honest, I've got a bit of imposter syndrome about talking about imposter syndrome. Yeah. Imposter syndromeception, if you would. So this may or may not go great. And, you know, I'll never know because I'll think it's shite anyway. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about recognizing imposter syndrome in yourself and in others, how to deal with imposter syndrome, and give you a few examples of real world examples of people I've spoken to who've had imposter syndrome. And then I'll just conclude it with, you know, a few points. Like that's what you do at the end of the presentation, right? So imposter syndrome, persistent doubt concerning one's ability or accomplishments, accompanied by the fear of being exposed as a fraud despite evidence of one's ongoing success. Now, despite what it says in the title, imposter syndrome is not a mental illness. It's an internal, and this is where it all goes wrong. It's an internal thought process. So there are many causes of imposter syndrome. And firstly, it's feelings of disparity or inequality. Anywhere where you think that you are not living up to what somebody else would live up to. And it can be related to age, sex, religion, gender, sexual orientation, pretty much anything that can separate you from another person. Now, as worthy of a cause as equality, inclusion, and diversity is, I'm not the person to talk about that. You know, as a young-ish white male, I'm going to leave that subject for somebody else. But I'm going to try and talk to it about in a professional environment as technical experts. So another one of the reasons that you might feel imposter syndrome is right after getting a promotion or a new job. That is one of the main areas where you'll get it, because you're thinking, am I suitable for this role? Have I just bluffed my way in? Probably not. You have the occasional one, but no, probably not. You are probably not unsuitable for the role. Most companies go through rigorous, and I mean rigorous, interviewing rounds. So you are in the right place. You wouldn't be in that place having that interview in the first place if you didn't belong in this industry. Personality can also have an impact on imposter syndrome. So for instance, people with neuroses are highly susceptible to anxiety, which impacts imposter syndrome. People who are perfectionists, who always aim to make sure they do and say the perfect thing and worry constantly that saying the wrong word or doing the wrong thing is going to make them less than perfect and make them seem like a fraud. And your upbringing, surprisingly, can also have an impact on you. And people who have come from overbearing or controlling families, or who have overachieving siblings, or where there's been conflict within the family and or low support within the family, those people are highly susceptible to imposter syndrome as well. So there's many, many things that can cause imposter syndrome. I can pretty much guarantee that virtually everybody in this room has felt this way at some point in the past. In fact, I'm feeling it right now. So imposter syndrome in the professional world. It's easy to get imposter syndrome in the professional world because particularly in technology, there is a lot to do, a lot to learn, and a lot of different skills. And we have a habit of comparing ourselves to the next guy, whether it's in seniority, whether it's in what they do, whether it's just how good we perceive they are. We might have been passed by for certain projects that we wanted to work on, or for promotions that we feel that we should have got because we were there longer than another person. Now, that is obviously going to make you feel like you're an imposter, like you don't belong because you're not good enough to get promoted. There could be other factors around it. There may be that the other person performed better. The main thing is that it's happened. You have to deal with it. Don't think you don't belong just because somebody else has succeeded. Missing goals is another one. A lot of people have, and me included, have a habit of setting large goals for themselves, and they feel very downtrodden and very much as if they're just faking it or they're not good enough because they don't hit them goals. I cannot tell you about the number of personal projects which are going to change the world that I have got on my whiteboard at home, which are never going to get finished, except the current one. The current one is absolutely the one. Another one is overachieving. Now, this might be a little bit, look like it conflicts with missing goals, but overachieving can be a sign, can be a symptom of imposter syndrome. People who overachieve, who work every hour under the sun, may feel that they have to do that they have to go this extra mile, they have to make things perfect, just so that people don't find out they're a fraud and they're not good enough to do the job in the regular hours. So how to recognize imposter syndrome in yourself? Self-doubt, it's pretty self-evident, and feeling overwhelmed. Again, in my experience, these come a lot of the times when you're just coming to a new job or a new promotion, or there's a massive task ahead of you, like delivering a new website within 4 months. Low confidence, not having confidence in your abilities, but also not having confidence in your abilities to assess yourself accurately. You're not able to comfortably give a level of what your skills are at. Fraud, feeling like a fraud, feeling like you don't belong, like you're just faking it, that you're relying on other people to get your work done and to achieve results. And low performance, feeling that you're constantly underperforming because you're not exactly where you ought to be, or that you're not performing as much as the next guy. Downplaying your successes. A big symptom of imposter syndrome is putting down successes, small and large, to look at external third-party factors. And it's important that you don't do that, that you recognize your successes and celebrate them. And agonizing over mistakes. People with imposter syndrome tend to agonize over the smallest things. It will keep them up at night, and they'll dwell on it for days and think about how they could have done it better. Personal experience. That has happened quite a lot to me in the last years. So how to recognize it in other people? This is a bit more tricky because we can never tell what's happening in another person's mind. But here are a few things you can watch out for, like not speaking up. If somebody's not speaking up much, maybe they're not speaking up in meetings, not contributing technically, they're not putting any opinions forward, they're very quiet. It may be a sign of low confidence. It may be a sign of not wanting to look stupid, not wanting to put an idea out there because they may look stupid. And they might not want to speak up because they'll be thinking, well, this guy's better than me. He knows what he's talking about. I've got nothing to contribute here. Speaking up too much, another sign of it. Again, it is in conflict with not speaking up as much, but again, with the perfectionist and the overachiever, people can overcompensate, thinking that they're not good enough, so they have to keep proving themselves, like speaking up, talking over other people, being very, very aggressive towards their ideas, because they feel that only by getting their ideas over will they actually be a success. Low confidence and courage. This is pretty much a low, like I've said, with not speaking up. It's not just confidence to speak up and put your ideas, but the courage and confidence to push back. If they see a bad decision or a bad technical choice, they will, again, not speak up because, number one, they could look stupid. And number two, they will assume that other people know better, or that other people have got this and they don't need to contribute because, you know, their opinion is not as good as theirs, as the next person's. So how can you deal with imposter syndrome? First one, talk to somebody. A lot of issues in the world can be solved by just talking to somebody. Talk about your feelings, talk about how you feel, talk about why you feel this way. Remember, try remembering all of your successes, all of your achievements, everything that you've contributed towards a project, and you know how much work you've put in. Small, large, it doesn't matter. Just concentrate on remembering that you have got successes. Breakdown, and this I don't mean break down on the floor or tears. Probably a bad bullet point. And I don't mean break down like breaking it down now and going to the disco or something like that. Whatever the kids do these days. I mean, break down your tasks. Make your big goals that you're worried that you're not going to achieve. Make them small. Break them down into small little pieces of work that are achievable within your, not just your work life, but also in your home life, because everybody's lives are different. Some people have more time at home. Me personally, I've not got a chance in hell. I've got 2 kids. I hate doing any extras. That comes on to as well, own it, which skipping a few points, but owning it. Once you've, sorry, not owning it. There's a missing thing on there. Celebrate your successes is meant to be on there. Just pretend it is. Celebrate your successes. Doesn't matter how little the success is. You've got those breakdowns of tasks. Celebrate when you've done it. And I don't mean hold a party or go out and get absolutely wankered. Have you got the beat button? Yeah. But maybe just like treat yourself to an Uber or a McDonald's or something. Or just pat yourself on the back and say, well done. Just give yourself a break and appreciate the achievements that you've actually got. Feedback. Elicit feedback from other people. Get people to tell you where you could improve, but also what you're doing well. There's something that I've been trying to use a lot in the last few years, which is Radical Candor, which is a book by Kim Scott. It's all about candid feedback, being direct, and making sure that the feedback is unambiguous. And it's important that we give critical feedback as well as positive feedback, because without that critical feedback, we can't grow. We don't know what we're doing wrong. We can't fix it. I've found as well, the higher up the ladder you get, the harder it is to get that critical feedback. But if you're worried that you're suffering from imposter syndrome, get feedback from people, because there is that fine line between imposter syndrome and actually a performance issue. And either way, it's not the end of the world. If there is a performance issue, you need that feedback to improve. But also, feedback can help get rid of your concept of you're terrible. Even if there is a performance issue, it will still highlight good parts about what you do, and the points to celebrate about your job, about your successes. So it is important to get that feedback just for your growth and to banish the demons. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Like I said, I'm a dad of 2. I've got other things going on in life. And there's no chance I'm going to be able to jump into all of the latest and greatest tech like Vue. I mean, I don't know where that came out of the woodwork. I'm still on Knockout JS, mate. But the point is, I don't have time to read every tech article. I don't have time to learn every new language. Some people will love doing that and they'll spend their lives doing that. Both are okay. Don't compare yourself to other people. Everybody is different. Everybody is interested in different things. Everybody expends a different amount of energy on it, and that's good. It would be a boring world if we were all the same. And question your thoughts. Make sure you have a chat with yourself saying, I'm having these thoughts, but are these thoughts actually realistic? You know, am I justified in having these thoughts? Am I actually not doing well? Or am I just kidding me, beating myself up? It's great to try and be able to do that self-reflection and tell yourself whether you are just having a moment of feeling you're down and you're not good enough, or whether you actually do need to improve on something. And again, after that, when in doubt, go back to point one, talk, route one, and own it. Don't try to get rid of your feelings. Embrace the feelings. You are having these feelings, and feelings are there to tell you something. Don't just shove them aside and ignore them. Use them. Put them to your advantage and make them push you towards greatness. Now, by that, I don't mean go ahead and work all night to look like you're absolutely exceptional. What I mean is use it. Identify where you think your weaknesses are. Talk to people about these weaknesses and come up with a plan of what fits in with your life, with your work and your home life, in order to progress towards what you want to progress towards. Might not be as fast as you originally wanted, but again, that's okay too. We've got to be realistic. How can you help us with imposter syndrome? Top three are exactly the same. Talk, have a conversation with them, ask them how they're feeling, try to find out what is wrong with them if you notice that they're suffering from some of these symptoms. And remember, remind them of the good things they've done, of their achievements, of their contributions to various projects, to various pieces of work, and even just to the team. Maybe it's telling a joke in a stand-up, or just something to lighten the mood or to spur the team on, or maybe you've delivered something big as part of a team, but you don't think they don't think that they are integral to it. Well, remind them that they are. Feedback, provide the feedback, as well as encourage them to give feedback as well. And by giving them the feedback, you're ensuring them that you've noticed the good things about them, but also you're helping them identify the areas where they genuinely need to improve. Encouragement, again, encourage them. If they're not aware of the sort of process of breaking the tasks down, or that they're not aware of the different processes, work with them, help them do it. But for God's sakes, don't do the work. That will only lead to absolute and utter chaos, and they will feel absolutely worse. And celebrate. Make sure you recognize that they've done a good job when they meet an achievement. And by that, it could mean a shout out in a public channel, but it is a double-edged sword. You've got to know the person, because some people will feel worse. They will feel more of a fraud if you shout out to a bunch of people in the organization about a bit of work that they've done. Sometimes a well done, or you did really well there, just an informal pat on the back, so to speak, is much more effective for these people. So you've got to know the people that you're giving feedback for, and don't just assume one side fits all when it comes to celebrating other people's achievements. So case study, Alexander Fernandez. And yes, I've got strict permission from every one of these case studies to use their faces and names. What I don't have permission to say is that Alex is one of the most humble people I've ever met, and probably the biggest sufferer of imposter syndrome I've ever known. So normally I would have some notes here to read out about how Alex feels about stuff like this. Unfortunately, I didn't realize what the setup was, and I got here slightly late. So I'm going to just, I've got my points on the board. I'm going to do the best I can. So when I asked Alex about how he's overcome imposter syndrome in the past, he changed the way I thought about imposter syndrome, because he said, I have never overcome it. I just accept it and I learn to live with it. He says in interviews, he looks like he's worried about looking like a fraud because he doesn't know how to use two neural nets together, or that he's not learnt Svelte, which is the current big thing. And he says what he does is he sits down and he has a think about it. He thinks, well, this is the interview I'm going for. This is where I want to go. Are these things that I'm worried about, are they actually relevant? Is it something I want to look at in the future, or are they relevant now? If they're relevant now, he puts a plan in place to try and look into improving his ability in those areas. If they're not relevant now, he puts them off into the future. But one thing he says he does is he doesn't stop thinking. He'll think about it and come up with a plan. Next one, Stacey McKenzie, head of product type person. Stacey has experienced a lot of imposter syndrome over the years, and it rears its head over and over, she says. She says, again, like Alex, it doesn't go away. You just learn to get coping mechanisms to deal with it as it comes up. And that you should own your feelings. You should embrace those feelings. Don't ignore them. Don't dismiss them. You're allowed to have feelings. Everybody's human, have those feelings. Try to pinpoint what you're worried about and think of times that you actually did well with this sort of thing. Think of times you didn't do so well and how you overcame it. Reflect on it, and try to think about what the outcome could have looked like without your input. Look at a project where you've been involved in. If you wasn't there, would it have been delivered on time? Would something have been missed that you've caught? Think about that. And ultimately, we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. We all have feelings of inadequacy from time to time. But it's important to realize that no person has a superpower that you don't. We're all in the same boat. So the last slide, there's not a picture because you've got a real live person here. So again, once more, David Johnson, software engineering manager at Flipdish. So my story is about when I started a role in consultancy. So for a decade, I had been a .NET developer. I had an interest in everything tech. I love the tech industry, but I did not want to be typecast as a .NET developer. So I went for a job at consultancy. Didn't get the role I wanted, but that's okay. I got a senior engineering role instead of a tech lead, a squad lead role, and that's okay. I'd only ever done .NET, different kettle of fish in a consultancy, and I still got a raise, so all good. Also, it took a long time for me to get on client site. Now, these two things together really built up that feeling of imposter syndrome in myself, that I wasn't good enough to go on site, that the company didn't want to send me to these engagements. But I had a chat with a couple of people, and something's gone awry there, never mind. I had a chat with a couple of people, with my squad lead, with the then chief of engineering, and I spoke to them about my issues and got career advice from them. And I spent my time, focused my downtime in refining my skills. So not just my technological skills, but I mean, I did learn Angular, React, did a lot of stuff with Node. I think it was still too long ago for Vue. That must be something new. I've never heard of Vue. Starting learning new skills, but also my softer skills, like speaking in public, which hopefully I'm a lot better at than I used to be. But also training other people, bringing on the next generation of engineers, which it was a rocky road to begin with at times. There was quite a bit of chaos around the place, but it's something that I've had feedback in my career, which has genuinely basically made my day when I hear this feedback. And I really like to inspire people, and I like to teach people how to not just write code, but do software engineering. And eventually I did get onto clients. I got onto a couple of clients, Step Change, Conveyor, and Lloyd's Bank, all of which I smashed it. Really good way of getting rid of imposter syndrome is doing that. But in all seriousness, I had to wait it out. I had to wait till I got onto those client site, and I had to prove my worth. And I proved my worth to myself. And that's my story of imposter syndrome and how I personally dealt with it. Keeping myself busy, focusing on what I can improve until I land on a site where I can use those skills. In conclusion, imposter syndrome is common. It happens to a large amount of people. It affects people in very different ways. Don't be afraid to talk about it and try to elicit and give feedback. Remind yourself of your other achievements and think when things have gone well, and identify those feelings and let them spur you on to great things and not to hold you back. So a couple of shout outs. Alpha G. Watton, founder of, and CEO of Alpha, for providing the slide deck. I'm not a graphics guy. I'm very much a logic guy. If someone comes to me with a design, yep, I can build it. He did the slide deck for me of the Slaying the Dragon theme. So shout out to him. Also, special thanks to Alex Fernandez and Stacey McKenzie for letting me use both their names, experiences, and pictures. That last one was a bit of a last minute thing. Mission complete. Thank you everybody for listening.
To say that was the first one back, you absolutely smashed that, so well done.
Cheers.
Questions from the room then. Do we have anyone that has any questions that they'd like to ask? Yes, we'll go just here.
So sometimes you don't get lucky and the person above you isn't very talkative and doesn't give a lot of feedback. Any tips on the right way or smart way to ask for feedback?
So just to repeat the question, no, some people aren't as lucky to have you as their manager. How do people below ask for the feedback and sort of implement this?
Yeah, so sometimes a lot of it comes down to personality, and in my experience, the way I would go about it is approach them and have a conversation. Talking works wonders for everything. I can't stop it, but have a real candid conversation with them. So explain to them why you want feedback, and not just why, but how. Do you want it in person? Do you want it in email? People respond to feedback in different ways and like to receive it in different ways. But explain what your goal is to get out of this feedback. And I've been on the flip side of the coin of being higher up than somebody and trying to get people to criticize me. And let me tell you, trying to get somebody to criticize you who is not comfortable criticizing you is an absolute challenge. Probably the hardest thing I've done. I've been to extreme lengths of setting up anonymous boards for people to post things. But the easiest way is to explain what you're doing. I explain about radical candor, which is why I've covered it here. I explain about the way I like to give and receive feedback. And ultimately, one of the best ways as well is give feedback to them. Provide them with the feedback. They're not giving feedback. So that is feedback they need to hear. They're not performing their part of the bargain. You need that feedback to grow. You need that feedback in order to correct anything that you're personally doing wrong. So give that feedback to them. Explain to them that what you need from them is this feedback. You need to know how to improve.
Do we have one more in the room or any on the live stream? Galani? No?
I must have explained it so unbelievably well.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, so I'm aware of things I do wrong.
Mhm.
Whether that's imposter syndrome or otherwise, but I never get feedback about those things that I've done wrong. Is there some way that you can encourage people to do that? Say, I know about this.
Mhm.
How would you suggest I improve it or something along those lines?
Yes. Again, have a conversation. You know that it's happened. Now, somebody not giving you feedback on it, they might be not giving you feedback on it because you know it's happened. I'm just assuming the microphone picked up the guy in the front row.
Yeah, I hope so.
The question was, how do you, if you know you've done something wrong and you're not getting feedback, how do you try to elicit the feedback and know how to deal with it differently? There we go. That'll cover it.
Yeah, that'll cover it.
So they probably know that you know you've done wrong and they're not wanting to beat you about it. That's usually the situation. But I would say still have a conversation. Go to them and say, look, I know I've done wrong, but I would really like your opinion and expertise of how I could have done it better. How should I have handled this situation? And you'd be so amazed at how much you will get out of people if you just ask them for it.
Perfect. Well, I think with the time that we're on as well, we'll all thank David again for his speech, and yeah, really, that was really great. We will have a 5-minute refuel, drinks, everything like that, toilet breaks, and then David Gregory is going to make us fall in love with open source software all over again. So please do come back in 5 minutes. Right, guys, if you can make our way back, I'll just introduce the more interesting person, the final more interesting person of the night. This is David Gregory. He's open source lead at Opencast Software. And over to him, just a gentle reminder as well that Hermes. Oh, he said it. He said it. Ooh. Oh, God. A whole night. Don't say Hermes. Don't. Evri have provided some free merch over there. A gentle reminder that the bike is not part of the free merch. So please do not ride off into the Leeds sunset tonight with that. But finally, over to David Gregory, who's produced a great presentation.
Hello. Hi everyone. So yeah, I'm feeling like a bit of an imposter actually after those two talks, both very good talks. And this is my first one back after, I guess, the pandemic and everything as well. So hopefully you're all good and ready. You're feeling relaxed. Yeah, had a few drinks. We all good. All right. So my talk's about giving back to open source software. So this has been kind of a long relationship for me with open source software, actually. So who in this room thinks they know what open source software is? Yeah, and if anyone's putting their hands up online as well, I appreciate you. Thank you. Okay, so out of those people who think they know what open source is, how many people in here have submitted a pull request to an open source repository? Yeah, so a few, quite good. Yeah, well done. Thank you. Very happy to see that. This is kind of an introductory level talk. It's you know, we're not going to get into the weeds. We're not going to talk about detailed history of open source software or anything like that. It's just, I want to tell you what open source software is, why and where it is. You know, the answer is everywhere, by the way. And why it would be really nice for you and for me and for everyone in the open source community if you would give some time to open source as well. All right. So what is open source software? So the simple definition is it's software with source code that anyone can inspect. They can change it if they want. They can enhance it, you know, and improve it for their own uses. There is a real like dictionary definition, you know, like, but that's much longer and we're not going to talk about that today. So where did this come from? So it began actually in the late 1970s, but I'm going to rewind a little bit further than that, to be honest. So in the 1950s, when mainframes, 1960s, mainframes were being, you know, began being sold to kind of large corporations for their needs. You know, everything was very different, right? You know, code actually wasn't really considered very valuable because, you know, programming mainframes was so difficult that if you didn't give people programs to go with those mainframes, they just wouldn't use them or figure out how to use them, right? So when a manufacturer sold you their computer, they would often give you like a complete, like exhaustive system specification. You would get all of the code for the system with it, you know, and it was kind of like, all right, okay, yeah, I can see how this thing works. I can work with this. But in the 1970s, once, you know, we didn't have to like manually tap like ones and zeros in, you know, or like once we didn't necessarily have to write assembly language all the time just to get things done. Hardware manufacturers started to think, and some big, large software companies started to think, oh, actually, we could charge people money for these programs, right? You know, we like money. So, so what happened was all of a sudden, programs were really expensive, right? And it became very expensive to develop software because software was getting increasingly sophisticated. I mean, if you want to go back and look into the history, I suggest you go and have a look at some of these early computers and what they could do. You know, they were almost purpose built to solve one specific task a lot of the time, or they were incredibly limited in terms of their capabilities, and it would take you like a week to calculate a single, you know, kind of program, that kind of thing. You know, lots of people were very annoyed about this programs costing money thing, right? And that led to the free software movement. So I think the best way to think about the free software movement is kind of like a software hippies, right? You know, free love, free code, You know, the kind of people with really long hair and big beards, and they had like, you know, like paisley, like a paisley smock, you know, all of that stuff, like sandals, socks and sandals, all of that stuff, right? So they were very annoyed about this thing because, and think about it this way, when you look at a product that you use today, so I've got this Fitbit on my wrist, you know, nearly everyone in this room has an incredibly sophisticated computer in their pocket, right? That is millions of times more powerful than the computer that sent astronauts to the moon. You know, that was a 1 megahertz processor that they used to send the Apollo mission. So just think about that every time you unlock your iPhone, right? You know, so what they decided to do about this was they decided to develop their own software, and they required people who use that software to distribute it under certain licenses, and these licenses were very strong in terms of what they required from the users. So if you modified the software, you had to redistribute the source code of the software with it. You had to publish the source code for your software publicly. You know, it was kind of an attempt to coerce, I guess, corporations into releasing their code, because the idea was you would develop software that was so good, right, just so incredible that nobody could avoid using it, right? It would be so amazing. And then corporations would have to use it and release their code, right? That would be great. And weirdly, this has actually kind of happened, right? So the Linux, you know, operating system and kernel, that is free software. And any large corporation that wants to contribute drivers to the Linux kernel, it's a bit sketchy. You know, they can distribute binary blobs, but a lot of people are releasing, you know, drivers and things like that as free software now. So, you know, these licenses, they meant that free software absolutely cannot be incorporated into proprietary software. So, you know, that's a problem, right, for corporations, because they want to charge that money for that code, right? So they just didn't use free software. So there's a quote here from Richard Stallman, weird guy, really weird guy. What? So right, let's not focus on the guy though, the quote. Okay, so the word free in our name, yeah. I mean, I've heard some weird stories about that guy, like just sat in a conference, like taking dead skin off his foot and like eating it and stuff like that. He's odd. He's very odd, but he's, you know, quite an, you know, influential guy in this kind of movement. So, you know, he said the word free, it doesn't refer to the price, it refers to freedom. So that the freedom to copy a program, give it to whoever you want, you know, so they can use it, to change a program. So, you know, you control the software that you use, right? And if you think about what the world looks like today, where your washing machine probably has a computer in it, you do not have a clue what that is doing, right? It's probably sending back all the information about its wash cycles to Samsung or whatever. It's probably saying like, oh, what's the weight of each wash load? You know, it's probably sending them, oh, you know, the filter doesn't ever get changed. What the hell's that about, right? So please change the filter. So you don't know basically what these programs are doing. You know, if you've got an IoT light bulb, you know, best not to talk about IoT. The whole thing's a mess. So default passwords, you know, open to the internet, no encryption, you know, all that stuff. So what's the open source movement? Because I talked about free software, right? So it broke off from the free software movement in the, I've said late 1990s here. That's not kind of true, I don't think, but it's kind of around that time frame. A bunch of, let's say, libertarian gentlemen and ladies thought, what if we could use kind of software where the source code was open to everyone at work? That would be good, wouldn't it? So they thought, well, what's the problem here? Well, the problem is these licenses, right? These licenses mean that my employer will never let me use this stuff. So free software was basically just banned at work, you know. And actually, when I started in the tech industry not very long ago. I'm going to say it was 2013, roughly, something like that. Before which I was a forklift truck driver. So I also don't have a very traditional route into tech, but that's by the by. So yeah, when I started in tech, lots of companies still didn't use open source. It was very much like verboten. You know, if you want to import a library, you need to like go and ask right the way up to the legal department, you know, get it all signed off. It could take months, you know. Actually, even recently at an investment bank, which I will not name, it took me 4 months to get a single Java library added to their repositories. So yeah, so very strange. The open source movement, though, it popularized much more permissive licenses. So this is basically just says, if it blows up the device that it's in and kills people, it's not my fault. Or, you know, it basically says, whatever you do with this, if it goes wrong, it's not my fault. All right. And all they ask in return is that you send the license out with that software. You know, it has to remain with that software. So actually, if you've got an Android phone, you might notice in almost every Android app, there is a big screen with all of the open source licenses that are used in those programs. There's probably one in the Fitbit app on my iPhone. There's probably, you know, just about any app on your phone will have a screen, you know, with the pages and pages of these licenses nowadays. The other thing is, who remembers the end user license agreement screen, right? Who remembers those ones that tried to enforce lots of very non-enforceable things? Nowadays, those actually just contain open source licenses most of the time. So you probably clicked through a bunch of these licenses, the Apache license, you know, you probably clicked through EPL, MPL, you know, all of these different MIT, BSD, I could go on, you know, whatever. They're all 3-letter acronyms. So this led to quite literally an explosion in the use of open source software at commercial companies. Like nowadays, you know, it's more likely that you are a pariah if you're not using open source. Really, it's very odd. So you can find open source software pretty much everywhere. So Synopsys did a report recently. They do a security scanning software. So it scans people's entire kind of code bases, you know, across massive companies. They put the figure at, like, I think in 2022, it was 78% of deployed code was open source. And that's just the repositories. Like, that's not the operating system that it's going to be deployed to. None of the drivers, none of the supporting software, all the infrastructure, you know, Kubernetes and Docker. And I mean, you know, Docker is a weird one. Let's not talk too much about that. But, you know, there is lots and lots of open source software out there now. It is, you know, pervasive. You know, like I say, there, most software components are deployed to Linux servers as well. So we have this unique situation, I think. We have this massive varied software commons where, I mean, if you go on GitHub and search for just about anything at all, any kind of software, from like a personal money management app to like, I don't know, scientific simulations, and you can find it on GitHub. It's out there with a variety of different licenses, and anyone can use this stuff to develop their own software, you know. And there is due diligence to do, you know. You don't want to just use something that someone wrote on a weekend, you know, while they were drunk in a trance, you know, like just in about 15 minutes, you know. You probably want to investigate the libraries that you use, right? But in most companies as well, developers can do that, you know. They don't need to ask for permission. And if you guys at Evri are developing new microservices, how many npm install commands have you run, right? How many times have you done that? I'm guessing it's a lot. So, and more than two. Okay. So and you're not in any way unique in that, you know. Almost every company is using tons of open source software today. So where do we see signs of this? Well, you know, how about this? So Mercedes-Benz AG uses free and open source software within several of its products. So you might get, if you're very lucky and you've been a very good boy or girl, or non-binary, you may get a CD with your brand new Mercedes that tells you which open source software has been used in kind of making your Mercedes do most things now, right? Because cars are very much, you know, electronic devices now. They're kind of a big box full of computers, right? And then there's an engine somewhere, you know. There's some, incidentally, they will get you from one place to another, but mostly it's about all of this electronics, right? What else? So I bought a TP Link, you know, one of those cheap routing things. I think it was like, you know, one of those power line adapters. And I got this little GNU General Public License notice. So actually they make you kind of send them a request to get a CD-ROM of all their source code if you want to do that. So actually they're kind of fulfilling the license terms of the GPL, but they make it annoying, right? So they don't really want to give you their code, but they will do it if you really can be bothered, right, to go through this painful process. So, okay, why should we contribute to open source then? So there are some selfish reasons to do it. So if you're a software developer, you can use open source as kind of like a portfolio in a way, you know. You can learn new skills. It's kind of one of those unique situations where if you want to contribute to a certain library, you can find yourself talking to like a world leading authority in about 5 minutes, just by like, oh, let's open an issue on the GHC issue tracker on GitLab and talk to Simon Peyton Jones, or, you know, let's open an issue on the Dotty compiler issue tracker, and Martin Odersky will respond to you sometimes, you know, if you find something particularly painful, some horrible bug. And the same goes for Java, for you know, for Node, anywhere you can contribute to this stuff, right? And you can talk to people who are experts, you know, and you can use tools that you can't use at work. You know, most companies have picked a tech stack, right? You do not have a lot of influence over that, and there's a lot of momentum, you know, in terms of the software you're already using. So if you want to learn new stuff and maybe even look at candidates for, you know, the next rewrite of Evri's website, right? Then that's a good place to look, right? Vue, that's open source as well. You know, React is open source. All of these libraries are open source. And actually interviewers, if you put a GitHub profile on your CV, yes, I will look at it, you know, because I want to know, you know, what have you written? You know, what are you proud of? Actually, that's actually the most interesting thing a lot of the time. What are the pinned repositories on your profile, right? And you can demonstrate your skills that way. So that's cool. But there are kind of bigger reasons, I think, in a kind of social sense as well. So if you use any software at all nowadays, you use open source software. Like there's no discussion about it. Even if you use all Microsoft things, .NET Core, that's open source, you know, F#, that's open source, C# compiler, don't know about that one. I think it might be actually. TypeScript, open source, TypeScript language server protocol, absolutely everything, you know, it's all open source. Android phones, broadband routers, all these little embedded devices, IoT, phone apps, the servers that are running the websites that you use, the operating system that those servers use, blah, blah, blah. You know, I could go on forever, you know. So unless you are living off the grid in a cabin in the woods with no power, and if you are living off the grid, probably you have a battery system, right? And some solar panels now, and they have open source software, right? So to make sure that the battery recharges properly. So you are using open source software. So I beg you to contribute back, because, you know, it's so popular, right? It's so popular because it's free. But it's not free to the people that develop it. You know, they've sacrificed hours and hours of their time, sometimes just out of intellectual curiosity, right? You know, I spent like 2 weeks, the last few weeks, looking at, oh, there's something interesting here about the relationship between recursion schemes from functional programming and the visitor pattern. I'd love to do a talk about that, by the way. because I have all of this open source software that I can draw on, and especially, you know, I wouldn't know about recursion schemes if Ed Kmet hadn't written the recursion schemes package for Haskell. I wouldn't know about, you know, the visitor pattern probably if someone had, you know, it's one of those pervasive ideas. The book, you know, did get everywhere. That's true. So companies rarely pay their employees to work on open source though, right? And when they do, it's usually their own stuff. So is that really open source? You know, you've opened some of your stuff. And I think there's a spectrum here as well. So Google, for example, if you contribute to a Google project, it's very unlikely that they will accept a PR from you unless it's such a compelling kind of feature, because there's risk, right? When you add a new feature to an open source repository, especially if it's used in production at large companies, and especially if it's that company's software, they might just not want to risk adding a third party's kind of code into their code base. On the other hand, you have completely independent kind of projects where everybody's just like, yeah, that's great, I'll merge that now, you know, like 10 minutes, 5 minutes. It's actually an achievement on GitHub for that now. If you can get a PR merged within 5 minutes, you get a little badge. It's exciting, isn't it? It's called, what's it called? I think it's, I don't remember, it doesn't matter. So yeah, these volunteers, they really need your help. You know, it is not easy to run an open source project, and actually there are things that go wrong when we do not help them. So when critical software is neglected, everyone probably recognizes this logo, right? Everyone in this room probably. So in 2014, there was this catastrophic bug found in OpenSSL. So OpenSSL is used, or was at that time used in, I think it was 60% of the web servers that were deployed on the web. It's probably higher now because there's probably more open source servers now than like IIS, and all of those things are kind of dying away. So this was terrible, right? Because what is SSL? Well, it's the secure socket layer, right? Or actually transport level security, I think it is, something like that, is the new standard, so TLS. And that is the technology that secures your connection between the server and your browser. So anyone can listen in on your stuff, right? Your passwords, your usernames, you know, absolutely anything. And it was a stupid bug, right? So it was, I'm going to send you a message, right, that has 5 bytes in it. Okay. And then the server goes, oh, I'm going to send you a message back that has 20 bytes in it. And then it was something like the client sent back, oh, I'm ready for your message that is 30 bytes long. And it would send back everything after those 5 bytes, you know, like the next 25 bytes, right? Just because unsafe code, unsafe language, you know, just you could access any memory anywhere. So if you requested a certain amount of data and then you just said, I'm ready for more data than that now, then you got what was after, you know, in memory. So laborious maybe to get access to credentials, but if you listen to enough requests, eventually you're going to find some. So that was bad. Why did that happen though? You know, so this XKCD, this is probably familiar to a lot of people. Really, I think it was, you know, drawn to emphasize this situation. The guys who were working on OpenSSL, it was maintained by volunteers. They had an OpenSSL foundation. They were desperately asking people to contribute, right? And all of these corporations were using it everywhere, like the whole internet, like 60% of all websites, every company in the world, you know, in some way was using OpenSSL, unless, again, they were like, you know, those kinds of tech Luddites, you know, like real crazy stuff. But it was maintained by volunteers. Only one of them worked full time, and it transpired actually that he was earning something like $25,000 a year, which wasn't great. And he wasn't really full time on OpenSSL, and they were doing work for hire contracts in order to make money. So people would pay them to add features to OpenSSL, but no one was paying them to look for bugs or security problems or anything like that. Yearly donations were about $2,000. So one of the kind of close contributors to the project said, OpenSSL has only 2 full-time people to write, maintain, test, and review 500,000 lines of business critical code. So that's not good. That's not good. So a few of you in this room may have a strong reaction to the next slide as well. Log4Shell, that was fun, wasn't it? Everyone loved that. when we found out that Log4j2 had a crazy bug that let you just put into any header in any request something like, please download this code from the internet and then execute it, because that's great, isn't it? So what you could do, it was based on the Java and directory interface. I cannot remember the full name, it's JNDI. And there was a feature in JNDI that just said, oh, just download this class from somewhere, right? So all you had to do as an attacker was write a class with a static initializer that did some stuff, and it would get executed on the server. And, you know, you could steal credentials. You could just look across the whole hard drive of the machine and send all this stuff back over a network socket. And most people do not stop outgoing packets on their servers, right? They don't put IP table stuff in to say, I don't think you need to send stuff back on that port. That's weird, right? This server doesn't do that. So lots and lots of credentials were able to be, you know, kind of stolen by this code. And it was easier to list the people that don't use Log4j2, quite honestly. Even people that were using Logback as their main logging library. Well, you know, if you use the Elk stack, you know, Elastic stuff, Logstash, Kibana, all of those products were using Log4j in their implementation. And it was a time kind of, you know, a time bomb as well, because if you had, for example, something going through a centralized logging system, and then it got flushed to another system that interpreted that data, oh my God, now it's being logged out by Log4j again. And now you've got the problem happening on a different machine. So it was awful, you know, an awful bug. Once again, there's a common theme emerging here. Oh, actually, let's look at the tweet. So the maintainer that fixed the bug, I work on Log4j in my spare time. I always dreamed of working on open source full time. 3 sponsors are funding Ralph Goer's work. Michael, Glenn, and Matt. Thanks guys. Would be nice to see some corporations there though, wouldn't it? You know, it would be really nice to see that, considering that they've been using Log4j for, you know, 20 years, probably something like that now. So you could argue about whether this feature was bad or not. Actually, it was requested by a commercial organization or a developer from a commercial organization, and they had a legitimate use case for it. But imagine you get like 20 PRs, 30 PRs and a day, you know, and you're not going to look through every single one and go, can someone use this in a weird way? But that's what happened. You know, they merged it. They went, okay, you've got this weird use case I don't care about, but if it makes you happy, that's fine. And they didn't really think about the consequences. So how do we contribute then? Well, most stuff, sadly, actually, it's all on GitHub, right? GitHub is now owned by Microsoft, which, as we all know, is the terror of the open source world. But they are pretending currently to have had a change of heart. I remain suspicious, you might have noticed. But registering an account there is almost essential. You know, most projects, they have a homepage, but ultimately everything happens on GitHub, or it might happen on GitLab. That's another source code hosting kind of solution. It's kind of freemium GitLab. So it has it's run by a company, but they have a free open source offering. So I don't know what I think about that, but it's kind of like a deal with the devil, but it's still better than having no idea what's happening in GitHub, right? And then them using it to train GitHub Copilot and steal all your code. so that's an improvement, right? So certain high profile projects as well, they have their own hosting solutions. So the Apache projects often have their own kind of Git server. Lots of older projects will have their own hosting as well. But I think the best route actually into open source is often just to look at the chat platforms that people are using to talk about the project, because like David said earlier, talking to people is really good. You know, they tell you what their problems are. If you say, I'm a new contributor and I'd really like to help out on this project, they will have lists of stuff for you to do, right? I promise you, you will find something to do, and they will try their best to pitch it at a level that is good for a new contributor. Actually, what I found is that looking on the project's issue trackers is not a great way to do this. People are kind of spotty about whether they put labels like good first issue on, or whether their good first issue is really a good first issue, because I think we all know as developers about the curse of knowledge, right? So once you know something, it's hard for you to know what other people don't know, you know, and you might go, so I looked on the Scala 3 compiler issue tracker a little while ago to see whether there's anything I could pick up as a good first issue. And there was some stuff in there about like making the Scala documentation tool do something to do with like how how to build things asynchronously. And I was like, I'm not sure that's a good first issue, actually, you know, and you'll often find this. So just asking people, that's great. So how about picking projects in the first place, though? So a good place to start, really. A lot of people in this room, I presume, are developers. So if you used libraries that annoyed you, you know, maybe you guys found bugs in Vue while you were doing your you know, kind of rebranding work, start there. You know this stuff already. You've used it as a user, right? Can you contribute as a developer? And another thing I will say, because this talk is kind of necessarily aimed, or it was originally aimed at developers, I guess, but open source projects want all kinds of skill sets. So think about if you have an open source project that has a UI. If there are UCD people in this room, they would love to get an accessibility review, a UX review. They would love your skills on their projects. And, you know, that is how, in a real way, you know, they're able to kind of compete with commercial offerings. So Postman, who in this room has used Postman? Yeah, a lot of people. There is an open source version of Postman called Insomnia. They would probably love a UX review, right? They would probably love an accessibility review. They would probably love all kinds of help from people, you know, product managers. If you can tell them, how can we make this more compelling for people? You know, what features should we prioritize? They would love that, right? So this is something I always try to emphasize, because it's not just about developers. And I think we would really like to bring more people into the open source kind of development world. So if you have some app that's annoying you, can you find out whether it's open source? So like Signal, you know, the app that you use on your messaging app, that's open source. Lots and lots of projects that you use will be open source. Like I say, if you're a developer, are the libraries that annoyed you? The next time that you run into one of those, why don't you just try and fix it? You know, instead of writing some weird hacky like patch over the cracks, you know, that like makes your project work. But it doesn't fix the underlying cause. And this is actually a big frustration for a lot of open source projects. So not only do they not get fixes, they actually don't get the issue reports in the first place. And if they don't know about issues, they can't fix them, right? So yeah, if you, even raising issues is appreciated, even if it's kind of, you know, bittersweet experience, let's say. So yeah. And if there's a particular kind of software project that interests you, you can find it on GitHub or GitLab, or you can look in the GitHub Explore screen. So there's trending projects on there. You can browse by topic. You can view curated lists that other people have created. Just have a look, see what you can do, and then get on those chat platforms and talk to people and see how you can help, right? So what can you find? Like I'm a little bit kind of Java-y person, so I really appreciate JMonkey Engine, because if you're not a C++ person, this is a good way to kind of play around with game development. Unity was that for a long time. Unity are doing some weird stuff now, not sure about that. Keycaster, so if you do live streaming of coding, or if you do live streaming of anything really on Mac OS, it will just show the little keystrokes, right? That's awesome. So I've used this a little bit. You know, if you want to show off how good you are at using Vim, right? Yeah, everyone appreciates that. C and assembly code for like old games and stuff. You can find the stuff for the Apollo program as well. It is incredible. And there's stuff in there like comments like, not sure this is going to work. And you're like, wow, they sent people to the moon with this. Good luck, guys. Difftastic. This is an incredible project. I have to tell you about this one because I think one of the things that is a bit of a problem with software development at the moment is we're very text focused. So Difftastic understands syntax. So it actually gives you a diff based on the syntax tree of your code. So it'll parse it using tree sitter, which is a parsing library that's incredibly fast. And it will tell you a diff based on some very clever shortest path algorithms that tells you what actually changed in the code, because usually we don't care about white space, right? We don't care about line breaks. One of the things that's most frustrating for us, I think, is when we change a piece of code and then the automatic formatter reformats the code in a very dramatic way. And you're like, great, you've broken open this parameter list now, but it looks like I changed loads of stuff, but really I just added one parameter. So Difftastic can see through that kind of, it's a visual textual change, but it's not really a change to your code. So that is a really cool one. It does. You can use it as a Git pager. Yeah. There's a setting in Git that will let you set the pager, and you can find that on the Difftastic README, I think. So I found this a couple of weeks ago. This is called Code Galaxies. It's just an incredible visualization of package ecosystems. So this is .NET. The size of the stars is how many downloads those packages have, right? And these edges between are the dependencies between packages. And this is a 3JS app. So it's actually a 3D visualization, and you can use the WSAD to zoom around like a little spaceship through this package ecosystem, hover over stuff, see what it is. There's some really interesting stuff to find there as well, because you can kind of see, if I look at Rust, I see all the Rust embedded stuff is over here on its own because it only gets used by other Rust embedded things, or you can see all the post CSS projects all clustered together. So definitely have a look at that if you have a chance. Just search for Code Galaxies. So there's stuff like this, like it doesn't really have a purpose to exist. It's just awesome, right? It's just cool. That's all. That's why it's there. It's there to be cool, and for someone to show off. And it was incredibly difficult for them to do this as well. They had to download all of NPM to do the NPM visualization, 3.2 gigabytes of data. And that was in 2019. Who knows how big that is now? It's probably enormous. Similar situation with the other package ecosystems. They must have used like Nugget to like download each piece of metadata one by one. So what to contribute? So even very, very small contributions are like super appreciated. So that lots of people started by developing this tiny piece of code and they went, this solves my problem, right? I'm just going to put it on GitHub because it makes me look good. Remember my GitHub profile and my recruiting kind of thing. I'm thinking about people looking at my online CV. So they didn't get into open source software because they love people arguing on the issue tracker. They don't love issue triage. They don't like getting rude, entitled, inconsiderate bug reports from people working at corporations who want them to add a feature in their own free time. Quick, please. So all this stuff happens. Complicated coordination of releases. So I do quite a lot of work in the type level Scala ecosystem, and it's very modularized. There's lots of different repositories. So when you want to do like a Scala version upgrade, or you want to do like, we want to release everything for Scala native, the LLVM port, we want to release everything for, Scala.js, the Scala to JavaScript compiler. You have to do this across a lot of projects to get a single project ported, because all your dependencies need to be ported before you can port a project. This leads to really complicated release kind of cascades almost across projects. And it's led to them doing some interesting stuff like developing very, very clever dependency bots that look for things using heuristics, and, they can run code migrations when they bump a dependency version that upgrades all the code automatically to use new APIs and things like that. They don't like writing detailed documentation either. I don't know about you, but like when I'm just exploring my kind of intellectual curiosities, I really don't want to sit there and write a detailed description of how to use this as if I didn't know anything about it, because it's difficult. Writing for other people is work. It's a lot of work. It's probably the most difficult thing to do as a developer, I think. And we have very, very clever people who work at tech companies, technical authors, content designers. All of those people are much more qualified to do that than us, right? So there's lots of small things that you can do, just asking follow-up questions. So lots of people do a drive-by bug report. They go, right, okay, I've got this problem. I'm very annoyed. I'm in the heat of the moment. Doesn't work. Oh, I'm using version 7, right? And then, you know, it's very hard to get more information unless they're watching that issue report. And if you leave that for a little while, they'll probably stop watching the issue, right? So it's great to have someone to go on and go, okay, what were you trying to do? You know, can you give me any more details? Do you have logs? Do you have a reproduction repository? That kind of thing. Helping to maintain the change log. That's boring, right? You know, if you're an open source developer, and you spend a lot of time working on features and bugs, the last thing that you want to do in addition to all of that is to write what you just did, right? In each release. Helping to diffuse disagreements, right? Or to be the calm person in the room, right? When someone's being very rude or angry. Fixing typos, expanding documentation, clarifying it. Or just, you know, having a think, right? Are we doing things in the simplest way? Can we improve this project's processes? DevOps engineers, I'm sure lots of projects would love for you to have a look at their pipelines and go, how can we make this 10 times faster, right? Because open source developers, not necessarily, you know, we don't know the most about infrastructure. We don't know the most about how to build things quickly. That's a great way to contribute if you have those skills. Creating an issue template, add a contributor guide, even just write down what the release process is if nobody's done that yet. So these small contributions, they kind of add up and you start to become familiar with these code bases and how you can contribute in a kind of more impactful way. So if that works, that's great. And if they don't, well, the maintainer's still won, right? They're still grateful to you. And you've still got experience of working with a different technology or a different library than you normally use. And, you know, you save them time and effort, you know, doing that thing that they can use to fix bugs or add stuff to the project, right? So this is the end, and this is a plea, right? If you can put forward a case, if you're in that privileged position where you can suggest new initiatives, maybe you don't need to suggest them, and maybe you can just get going on them, tell people to do them, right? If you're very senior in your organization, please pay people to work on open source because you already get a lot of value out of it. You know, you already use it. And we're living in what I would call probably a golden age of open source software, but it cannot continue forever if nobody contributes back. Eventually, all of those maintainers will burn out. They will have families. They will have no time to work on this stuff. They will, all kinds of things happen in a person's life, right? And it doesn't, yeah, if those things happen to you, working on open source software is not your top priority anymore. So we need to kind of replenish the number of people who are working on open source. And it would be really wonderful if companies could do their part to help with that. So that's it. Very much.
Thank you very much, David, there. Within the haze of love for open source, we have slightly overrun. I'm aware people might have trains to catch and stuff like that. So we'll go one question and then chase you down in the pub after for any more questions. So is there any questions from the room? You have covered that impeccably. So if you do have any questions that come up, please do go and ask David. Just a massive sort of thank you from us then, I guess. This is the first time we've run SocialCode in Leeds. It's an amazing turnout. Thank you mostly to the guys at Evri for having us here, for the pizzas, for the beers. for the rooftop view. I didn't think there was a place in Leeds that could make Ellen Road look good, and there still isn't. But no, it's an amazing place to work. It seems, and this open space has been perfect for what we needed tonight. We are going over the road to a pub called Toast, I believe, a bar called Toast, and there will be some money behind the bar for the first few rounds. So please do go and use that up. Sorry for the people at home. We don't have some bottle of San Miguel waiting at your door. But with Evri's delivery service, no. We are not Anton Deck Saturday Night Takeaway. But we are the Social Code, and thank you very much for coming tonight, guys, and hope to see you in the pub. Cheers.